started on a Friday night, hockey dreams before the dawn, cheering, running, drum beat inside the D, dreams are made inside the D, game changers rise inside the D, headlines and cheers inside the D. We thought we'd never fall, hockey balls, balls under neon skies.
Alright, Insiders, welcome back to episode 2 of season 2. And I'm really fortunate and honoured to be joined on set today with Mr. Des Donald and Morné Oorendal. Yeah, just a bit of background history about Mr. Des Donald and Morné, the two gentlemen. Two, I would say, a legend coach in his making and a legendary coach from his past days. Sitting right here on set with us here in Inside the D. And Mr. Donald, obviously being a coach since the 1970s. He's gone through coaching the varsity men's team, the Free State men's team, SA Schools coach, SA Schools assistant coach, SA Schools selector, SA Under 21 indoor coach and assistant indoor coach for the SA 21s. And obviously achieving a lot of success with Grey College in his days. And Morné Oorendal, sitting on my right hand side here, achieving so much success with the Oranje Meisie School in the last decade or so, winning so many of cups and medals that's up for grabs with the Oranje Meisie School, and obviously also being involved with the SA 21 and SA School setup in his days. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for being and joining us on set in your busy schedules. And I just want to ask a question. Your coaching philosophies. Tell us more about your coaching philosophies.
Yes, Bram, I must tell you, on the onset, I just want to say, coaching is something that happens exponentially. You know, if you think back to your coaching career, what I coached players in 1978, what I coached them in 80, what I coached them in 90, I actually feel ashamed of it, because the things that you know now, because of your growth, you would never have done in those years. So I think we learn from everybody. As a coach, you learn from everybody and anybody. It's important for a coach to go and sit in a dressing room, talk to players, talk to coaches. I can learn from anybody. In fact, one of the persons I learned the most from, I won't say the most, but I learned from, is sometimes after a grey hockey game, a rugby coach would come to me and say, "What about that player?" And I think about it, and it was actually true. But my whole lifestyle of coaching is to be able to take players at their level, to develop them exponentially as well, so that they can grow, in their latent talents can grow, and are able to exhibit this in a match situation to the benefit of the team. And I've got ways and means of doing that. I think hockey over the years has become a all-year sport. It's no longer 6 months of the year, no longer 3 months of the year. If you take, the Cape schools are dominating hockey at the moment, and almost every primary school in Cape Town's got an AstroTurf, and even the primary schools there play 12 months a year, where in Bloemfontein you would find we're lucky if we get 3 months or 6 months, and that makes a huge difference in the hockey at the moment.
Absolutely. Morné, and from your side, your coaching philosophy, your outlook over coaching?
Well, firstly, for me, it's a massive privilege being here with the two of you. I mean, Brampy and I, we played hockey together since grade 1 till we were about 25 years old. And then we played a little bit of club hockey when we were older at Tweespruit, the mighty Tweespruit. And then obviously Mr. Donald, He coached the two of us since we were in grade 10. We played 3 years for him at first team level. So it's just awesome to almost have a full circle moment with the two of you. Just giving back to hockey again, just sharing our knowledge and just sharing what we've experienced through the years. Hockey philosophy, I agree with Mr. Donald. It's so funny. It's back in the day also, I remember him and I, we had a conversation about how every year you feel almost ashamed about how you coached that year with all the things you learned in that year. And I agree with him. So if you've got to go in a nutshell, you always try and get something into place for that season. And for this season, for me, it's a balance between having values in place, what the players put in place, and it's also having principles. And with all that, it's just to have fun. I want people to walk past a field when Urania plays and to be excited about the style of hockey they play, and then to see the kids being happy. And if you can see the style is attractive and the kids are happy, I'm very pleased. Results always takes care of itself. I'm not really a results-based coach. I'm more an entertainer, and I want the kids to have fun. Because we don't know what they're going to do after school. They've learned so many life lessons while we do the sport that we love. And I'll rather focus on that point versus the result point.
That's some interesting insights there from Mr. Des and from Mornay.
I agree with him. You don't focus on. Many people think we push win. But I think you have to push the task on hand. What is the job on hand? What is your job on the field? What is his job on the field? And if you do the task properly, you'll get the result. You'll
100%.
get the result.
Mr. Donald, but there's something that I picked up in your introductory, your coaching philosophy, and you mentioned about, there was a player in the 1970s and how that's changed in the 1980s and the 1990s, and how were the players like every single decade that you've been involved? Any changes in the players' dynamics and the outlook to developing players?
I started off at a small school in Bloemfontein. I had, I think, 200 boys in high school, Brebner School. And it was a year later, Monet's mother, in fact, Elsie, joined me there. She was also a teacher there. And I tell you, there was unbelievable talent in that school. We mustn't think that there's not talent out there. There's a lot of talent in the talent in those years. I won't mention names because some of them were very good. I think we had like 15 SA schools played in a matter of 10 years. But we also have very good coaches like Stephen Bryan, who passed away of late. Clinton D'Oliveira, who was a coach at Grey, when I played first team, he was my coach. And then of myself, we must acknowledge the coaches that went ahead of us. For me to get players at under 18, I need a very good structure below me. You need good coaches in the primary school. You need a good under 14 coach. You need a good under 16 coach. And in the years that have gone by, we've always made sure that happens. And I must say, over the years, the players, you might have in a span of 10 years, one bad year that I know I had it when I coached Grey, for instance. But the players have developed from those years that have developed and gone through my hands I think that they were just as good as the players that we've got nowadays. There's no really a sudden rise in the standard of play. Yes, the AstroTurf affected it. Yes, the rules affected a lot of things. I mean, if we could play a ball above
in your days, you still had offsides and
yes, you had long corners that were stopped like a short corner.
Yes,
just from the corner flag. And I mean, if you could have pulled an overhead from the top here, I would have won a lot more games. Okay.
Absolutely, because you weren't allowed to put your stick above your shoulder.
I mean, Wes standing in a circle doing this, and he thought it was a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Mornay, for you, obviously, you and I, we are now seen as sort of older players back in the days from when we started, and just put yourselves in your own sort of shoes now, developing as a player. Is there any difference between modern players and the way that we were back in the days?
I can give you a good difference between when I started coaching in about 2012 till the kids that I'm coaching now. And there's a massive shift that came just after COVID. And the shift is the kids are way more emotionally intelligent. They've got way more information on their fingertips. So if you spoke to a player in 2005 when we were playing, you could tell them just to be better, to step up. Now they want 3 ways how to step up. So coaching now has changed a lot. It's not as it used to be. It's way more complicated, and because there's so much information, you need to simplify it as coach. And that is a big topic. How do you simplify the complication for them to still understand very difficult things, very basic? It doesn't help you make it very complicated for these players because they're as intelligent. They're very gritty, they're very smart. To understand their players, their co-players' emotional intelligence as well, very, very well. So it's very interesting to see how these kids have changed. There's no more stick, it's just carrot. You just got to put it in front of them and you just got to be positive. Everything is now getting the best out of the kids.
Okay. Yeah, emotional intelligence, by the way, you need a growth mentality. If a child is prepared to walk a mile with you, the emotional intelligence and even your intellectual intelligence can change. They used to at one stage think that intellectual intelligence can't change. If you had an IQ of 110, it would stay there. It's not the truth anymore. They now think that with a growth mentality, in other words, I want to work at it. I want to improve myself. Your attitude is one of growth. Then your intellectual intelligence and your emotional intelligence will improve. Emotional intelligence goes about how do I handle my thoughts, my thought patterns and stimulation, and how do I manage my emotions. But at the same time, you have to manage your partner's emotions as well on the field, and you have to manage the intelligence regarding the coaching style of somebody.
Is this something, Mr. Donald, that you spent time on during your process as a hockey coach, from the 1970s right up to the 2000, late 2010s, 15s when you sort of stopped coaching competitive hockey? Is that something that you've brought in? Was it the same in the 1970s? Was there so much focus on, like Morné said, the emotional intelligence, the information, and what do you think? Morné, I'll get to you on that question. But first, Mr. Donald, on what I've asked now.
You know, I think what you have to realize that I think all three of us have played hockey at a reasonable level. You must know what a left half's experiencing, a right half's experiencing on the field when he gets funneled into one position and now he's under pressure. So when you're doing like your summer school and pre-season practicing, you draw those guys in and you talk to them and you're giving him input all the time to improve his emotional intelligence in that position and how he must relate to his other players and to the opposition. I mean, I made you guys carry tires. Do you think it was just to punish you or what? It was to...
Well, at that stage, it felt like punishment.
Short answer, yes.
But it was there. It was to realize I've got an opposition that's going to niggle me. It's going to chirp me. It's going to make me upset. And you must be able to cope with it.
Yeah,
that's what it's about. So I had to use the bit of psychology I did at varsity third year level. I had to use it in a way what I didn't always explain it to you, but I did say to you that's your opposition that you got with you, and he's niggling you. Mm. And sometimes you must challenge players. I mean, we used to play mock attack, and mock attack can now. I mean, you take hockey now.
I still play mock attack as a coach.
Yeah, but what you have to do now is the intensity is so high. And I watch these guys. They run at 100 miles an hour with the ball, carrying the ball, getting themselves nice and tired, and they still make good passes under the high intensity they're playing. And the runners off the ball are running intelligently to receive, especially in Ds.
Yeah.
So it's very important, these things.
Morné, and from your side, obviously coaching in the modern, and you spoke about players they've got information overload. And obviously social media has played a very big part of it. Phones being, every player's got a phone, tablet, so even our TVs that we've got, you can just go on YouTube's and whatever the case might be. Is that something that you allow in your coaching methodology for the players to actually bring in their phones to become better and learn more?
I think that's an interesting question because I think in different phases it's good for the kids. So in primary school phase, the more you see, the better it gets. When you get older, you've got to get more selective. So how much of these cool tricks are good for their hockey ability? When you're young, you start getting a relationship with your hockey stick, and your hockey stick becomes one with you. So all these tricks are awesome. But now when you get a little bit older, when you start hitting high school, it's more about technical ability. Then small things make a big difference. Grips, elbows, body position. That's then when the tricks sort of fall away because you've become one with your stick and now you've got to get the technical ability 100% correct. But with the technical ability, also the mental side of the game, I think, has enhanced times 100%. When we went to Affis with our inter-school, the Affis netball side, the number one person they travel with is a mental coach. That's their person. So at this moment for Urania, the number one person we travel with is a social media person. Because I feel it's so important to get more hockey information out there to people. That's where we are at our current phase. Where the netball at Affis is the number one netball team in the country, it's a mental coach. So the big thing that I think coaches sort of miss out on is when players go into bigger matches, the mental state they're in, we don't acknowledge it. We just move past and hope they will get over it. Instead of rather making them face their fear. What's the worst case scenario? And move past it to be mentally strong and to be confident when they play.
Yeah.
And that's sort of this thing we saw with Bafana. You could see when they were warming up and stuff against Mexico, they weren't ready for the big occasion.
Body language is terrible.
100%.
Yeah.
And you can feel it from a coach. Doesn't matter what sport it is.
I mean, you guys, I never spoke about winning, but I knew how to win and I knew what to do to win. And I think you never ever walked onto that field thinking you're going to lose.
No. I think that's one thing that we
and
could
that's
say.
how do you instill that? You instill it in by having a relationship with your players, in the sense of you talk to one here, you talk to one there, you go to that one, you go to that one, and before they realize it, you've gelled them into a unit, and nobody sees it because it happens so naturally. You know, you don't have time to have a psychologist. Children have got schoolwork still to do. They've got lots of other things to do. They've got lots of other challenges. So you have to gel all these things in one in the time you've got available. And remember when we started hockey, Gray had to go to the Astra in the middle of the stadium, which is the best car park in Bloemfontein at the moment. And we had to go there, and we had only 1 hour to practice hockey. So then we used to run a bit after that, and sometimes we would go to the computer center. But when Gray got its AstroTurf, we didn't lose to Maritzburg College ever again. Did you realize that?
But that's also an interesting story.
I think
Well,
we lost once.
Perhaps once, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
but the rivalry changed. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. And I'll go there later about who scored the winning goals.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait for that. But gentlemen, just in terms of, and insiders, I hope you can see how privileged we are today to get some insights from both these coaches, and two different coaches from different eras, but definitely similarities from back in the 1970s, building up to the 20th century, and what we're currently facing with. There's definitely similarities from what I pick up in terms of emotional intelligence and just maybe the methodologies have sort of changed a bit. But discipline and standards, is that something that's really important for you as a coach and for you as a coach? And what sort of standards do you set for players, or you used to set for players?
I think discipline, it's a mutual respect for one another. I respected my players and I loved my players. And I think they knew it, but sometimes they saw it as tough love. Sometimes they saw it genuinely that I'm interested in them. Sometimes you have to tighten the screw a bit, but you're going to not let a child push you around. Unfortunately or fortunately, I was a headmaster and I'm a teacher, so things came to me naturally. And I think this is where the big difference comes in coaching. I think Morné's got a wonderful relationship with his players. I've watched him. I always said to players, you don't get too close to a child. This hugging and thing, it's nowadays that you have to be very careful about things like that. But you have to have a relationship with your players. But he has to know where that line is that they don't cross. And even now with children that are entitled, I believe I haven't experienced it yet because I don't hope not to experience it one day. But entitled children, you can draw them in to trust you because you're knowledgeable. Your knowledge as a hockey coach is your biggest weapon. His knowledge of hockey is his biggest weapon, that he won't have discipline. If you have got knowledge of the game, you're not going to get mothers coming to you, dads coming to you, because you're going to do what's right. And you're going to do what's best for your children. A coach needs a personality. He's got a certain personality about him. And he carries things over. And he looks his players in the eye when he talks to them. He looks the parents in the eye. And it's not a thing that you mess around with. But discipline is hard. If you tell a child, this is your role in the short corner, and unless there's a change of the ball didn't come out, the ejection wasn't good, then you have to change him. But I've had players where they decided, when I called the thing, to take it on themselves to do something. The next time he sat on the bench, and you said to me, don't do that again. So that's the way you bring about discipline.
Moraine, for you?
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Donald. A little trend that's changing now a little bit is it's more a case of the team with the coach puts values in place, and that would be things like grit, discipline, respect, belonging, those type of things. And as a group, you
Correct.
decide on it.
Correct.
And after you've decided on it, if someone steps out of place, it's so easy to speak to them on one of those values. So let's say it's discipline, coming late for practice. The conversation is so short. We spoke about discipline. Well, how do you feel about your behavior in this situation? I'm so sorry, I went to the dentist and that's why I'm late. And then it's a respectful thing to understand sometimes these things do happen, and then to speak to the child according to how they could have handled the situation a little bit better. Just send me a message. Sorry, coach, I might be a little bit late because I'm going to the dentist. So it's putting things in place beforehand, so you don't have to have that hard, uncomfortable conversations, but it's rather the values that's already in place.
Do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
For that, what I pick up is that relationship with players in creating an environment where discipline and standards are upheld to the fullest potential is important, Mr. Donald.
Very important. I mean, I've mentioned it 3 times already. It starts that very day that you start your summer camp. You go through the year, At the end of the year, I start bringing in the little babies to practice with the matrics. For that child to practice with that matric is like, shoot, this is a hero of mine. Now I have to play with him. But next year when he starts playing, he's past that stage because he's grown into it. And he sees, I was with this teacher, now I'm now with Mr. Donald. This is a different, serious situation happening here now. And his whole methodology is of such a nature that it takes you through things, and there are reasons for going through those things. You think back in the days we practiced, yes, we had fun. Yes, Mr. Donald was sometimes not in the mood, but there were most times we were busy.
Especially if you hit him with a hockey ball on his shin.
From 80 meters.
And then you must run.
It's an hour and a half baseline. But yeah, like we're sitting now and we're speaking, Mr. Donald.
But we can laugh about it.
Yeah, we can laugh about it.
But why can we laugh about it?
Back then we couldn't laugh because back
No,
then
they
it was a serious matter. But now we can laugh about it because of the relationship that we've gotten. I mean, our team that we had 2004. I mean, we're still all in a group and we're sharing jokes, and Mr. Donald is on that group, and we're just having we just keep on having chats on it and sharing some memories, and for old time's sake, which is quite good, and it's nice to see those things. But like you say, if a relationship wasn't there, things like that wouldn't have been able to take place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moraine, from your side as well, tough love, is that needed as a coach?
Definitely, I think it's more honesty. Rather honest versus tough life. And you need to keep each other accountable. You need to keep the kids accountable. The kids need to keep each other accountable. They also need to keep you accountable. And it's all in the same values. So if you as coach are not letting everyone feel the feeling of belonging in the team, they need to be able to speak to you about it. If kids feel someone's not treating someone else with respect, they need to be able to speak to each other about it. And I think what Mr. Donald said is so true. The relationship part of being a coach and creating that little group into a family, that is 60% of the job. The tactical thing is about 10% and 30% is the technical ability of being able to play hockey. But 60% is just becoming a family and running through a wall for each other. If you get that right, the rest is easy.
And that's something that, Mr. Donald, I can say,
Yeah.
coming through your hands,
100%.
that's something that we did. We went to war for each other. We
100%.
would back each other. We would run hard. I mean, even at fitness levels, I can remember when we were doing fitness, running around the touch-up field, and the guys coming in first.
Morning.
Stop.
Yeah. Stop it,
And
waiting for me.
they ran back, and when they're going to fetch the guys from the
Yeah.
ground, and we used to pick each other up, and we ran through
Yeah,
the
but
finish line
that's
to
what
get
it's
into
about.
this.
It's that having to go through a brick wall together in the times of trouble in a hockey game, bring you out on top.
100%.
Bring you out on top. You think back, shit, remember that day this happened.
Yeah.
Come boys, stand together now.
Yeah.
When I'm on the bench sometimes, I think, things aren't going well. Now, how can I change this game around quickly? I must do something, even if it's controversial, I must do it.
Yeah.
And I tried to do it, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work.
Like moving a forward to a centre back and stuff like that.
That's another thing. A coach must be able to see those things. You should have been there long ago,
Yeah.
because that's where you played your best hockey.
Yeah.
By a mile. Look, the other good place that you saved our bacon, I'll never forget, is I think Louis Botha hit one across the D against St. Albans, and your stick was there and it was under the crossbar. It was one of the best goals that was scored.
I can remember that.
Yeah.
remember.
Some of the
And we were,
like the only goal I scored it here.
and we,
Specifically, I can remember.
we had our backs to the wall in that game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Donald, you mentioned in your previous in the set that bringing in smaller players,
Younger
younger players at the end of the season. So how difficult is it, Mornay, as well this year, well in modern hockey as well, to balance winning versus development of younger players? Because obviously you still need those players to get into a situation where they can perform. You've got their eye on them, they can perform at first team level, getting the experience, but to bring it in, how do you balance that winning versus development in your coaching methodology, Mornay?
The big thing is, Brom, you got to be good enough. You can't put a player in the deep water when they're not good enough. If they're talented enough, but emotionally not ready, you don't put them in there. So they've got to be good enough to contribute to the team. That's the most important thing. It's different to bring them in to train with the first team at a certain point of the season, but to just give out caps for the sake of it. The problem with that is if players aren't ready, they lose their confidence. And also when you bring in players too early, other players that still also had a chance, they lose hope. And that's the biggest thing you can give to your hockey program is hope. People need to work towards the first team for as long as possible. But if there is a youngster, doesn't matter the age, especially with girls, if they are in the high school, if they're good enough to contribute in a positive way to the team, they should play if they're emotionally ready for it.
Mr. Donovan, this is also something that you've done in your coaching career, where you've given grade 10 players an opportunity to play first team, especially at boys level, which is, you don't see it a lot these days anymore, where grade 10 players actually get the opportunity, and that's something that you've done. Was that part of your success?
I did that in pre-seasons, and at the end of the season we used to continue practicing, and often the guys would just at the end of the season the matrics would start preparing, and we'd bring in like grade 8s and grade 9s, and we'd bring them in. And I agree with you have to be very selective. You don't want the guy to lose confidence and to break up entirely. But I remember one year selecting a Free State men's side, and we had a camp, and the camp was divided into 4 teams, and I had coaches from outside taking, like Brian Ebert, I got in, Clinton D'Oliveira got in, I got more chaps in, and I invited one grey boy to the thing, because about one of the few schoolboys there, Philip Luke, and he ended playing for Free State in his standard 7 year. He was not scared of anybody, and he was very, very good, and he played, I think, 3-4 years. Well, in those days we had to be very careful, but you could still take an under 16 and put him into the under 18 system, but you're not allowed to anymore with IPT.
Yeah.
because he would then sometimes even go to under 16. But the rules changed. But he made SA schools for 3 years, I think. And unfortunately, he was killed in a motor car accident. He comes from Namibia. But that was a phenomenal hockey player. And yeah, I think what Morné says is true. You have to nurture him through the whole system. But Morné uses a lot of young players in his first team.
Yeah, I usually do. I'm not scared of giving them opportunity. They got to be good enough and confident enough. There's a difference between, and usually those youngsters, you get different types of players that want to compete, players that want to win, and players that want to be the greatest. It's those type of players.
Can I say one thing? I think the base, when we coached in the 90s, early 2000s, every year you had about 3 or 4 players that were just not the standard of the rest. That's changed. I think we've broadened the base. I know Grey College certainly have got 16 really good players. I know he's got about 19 really good players.
90, yes.
Yeah.
9-0.
Did I say 1-9? But the base, and there's something happening here for that to happen.
Yeah.
It's a case of running camps and running coaching courses. And schools need to do it, but they must get the right people to do it. And I mean, we even had a manual that at Grey College that even Mr. Flash used to have every year to. And I coached him into the manual, what we're going to do, where, in what direction. That you don't also know.
Yeah.
You see. So Mr. Hugo used to do the same. And the 14 case,
Mr. Dixie Dijkman.
he used to go there with his book, I suppose. Check what they're doing today.
Grip notes.
Yeah, I can remember. Was Baba's Black Magic part of that book? Because we used to have a story called Baba's Black Magic.
It never worked.
But it was it was supposed to be amazing.
He still doesn't know what honk was.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, but look, I was a forward, so honking. If I was honking, would have gone over the baseline.
I think it came after you. I think it was in Ryan McLaren, just after Ryan McLaren. We said, guys, sometimes you must skip pass, pass and you leave it. But if you shout skip, everybody knows.
Yeah.
So you're running and you say honk and the guy leaves it. And if the guy behind you picks it up and he's no more.
But something that we as forwards had to do, rubbernicking.
Oh, yes.
So we had to.
No, everybody.
We
The
had
defenders.
We had to rubberneck as well.
Yeah.
Because those balls were flying left, right, and centre. And sometimes we had to be rubbernecking with Morné playing because he had a yardstick that went from coast to coast.
Never passed.
Never
passed.
Shielding yardstick.
It just went like that. So we had to rubberneck our necks over there.
There's some stiff necks.
Yeah, listen, I was wondering why I've got
Your
neck
back
problems and shoulder problems.
I'm sorry.
Probably because we didn't train our necks too much back in the days. But listen, so is winning everything for your programs? Is winning everything?
Not at all costs. Not at all costs, but we don't stress winning, as I mentioned it before. I think if you just do your task at hand, if you just do what you're told, if you just play to the best of your ability, the winning will come. And if they don't win, then you know these guys have tried their best. And if that's more than enough for me. If a person is just given 100%.
I think there's a difference between success and significance. The reality of it is a program will be judged by the success, and the success is a winning rate. That's the reality, and that's something you need to also be aware of when you are a coach. But significance, that's the most important one. What difference did you make in the kids' lives? And that is the balance between the two.
And that came to my next question. Is winning at all costs? And sometimes it feels to me there are programs where winning becomes at all costs, to the detriment of the well-being and actually the player that you get, that you can send out into the world. And to find a balance, I think young coaches, if you are listening, to find a balance between, like you say, Morné, success and significance. Success is your program, your win ratio, versus the quality of player that actually, when they leave your hands, go in and make an impact in the world. And I know both of you as coaches, that's just your philosophies as well, to leave the player in a better state that you've received them, and to really be impactful human beings in society. I I've got a few interesting questions, and I'm going to throw your way over here. It's a quick fire round of questions, so no thinking, just let them go. All right.
Okay, doing Mr. Donald first.
No, you can go.
Together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Toughest team you've coached?
Maybe what?
Toughest team that you've coached?
Against or coached
No,
yourself?
that you've coached.
SA
Toughest team.
school side in 1996. A very good hockey side. But let me tell you, it takes you out your comfort zone. And it was just after IPT, and the players were a bit knackered. And in that, it was an Africa's Cup tournament. And we played the B side. We were always motivated to beat the A side. We played Egypt. And I promise you, you will not play against a harder team anywhere in your life. Physical, we'll go to extremes to win. And then we also played the Pakistan under-21 side, who had beaten every game they played, 3 tests against under-20 side, they'd beaten them. And we lost 3-2 to them. And Kevin Grant still hit the crossbar in the last minute. So that was the toughest team I've ever coached. But not only that, half the team's fathers were SA international players.
Oh, okay. That makes it tough. That brings a bit of the numbers. Mornay, for you?
It's a hard one. I think every team's got its challenges. But I would say the team where I learned the most and where I had to coach the hardest was probably my first year at St. Anne's.
Next question. Best player you've coached?
Choose one.
One player.
He might be sitting in the studio.
Greg Nicol.
Greg Nicol. Mornay, for you?
For me, is a combination of Anay Jans van Vieren and Michaela Leroux.
Biggest regret as a coach?
That I resigned as coach at Grey College. But I was going to say, I wanted this man also to get SA schools, but he wouldn't listen to
No, I was uncoachable.
But listen, also there was I can recall we were playing Maritzburg College on their turf, and we were, Mr. Donald, you had a beautiful plan of overheads, and we were actually leading 1-0 at halftime, and then someone whispered in your ear, stop the overheads.
I
Use the
remember
term.
that clearly.
And we stopped.
I'm telling you. It's the honest truth.
Yes. And we stopped the overheads.
And I won't listen to them again.
Mornay, for you?
What was the question again?
Your biggest
Sorry.
regret as a coach?
I think not enjoying and being present enough in my first 10 years at Urania.
Okay. Favorite victory?
I promise you, there were many. Like beating the old Red School was always enjoyable because that was the benchmark. But one year in 1997, we played IPT with the Free State side. Charlie Felino was my captain. No, Dennis Kruger was my captain. We beat the one day, I think on the Tuesday, we beat Miners, who had about 5 SA players. The next day was Natal. And we played Natal. They had about 11 national players. And we beat them 2-1. And I was sitting on the bench, and here comes Brian Kelly. I don't know if you guys know Brian
Before
Kelly.
my time.
Brian Kelly was a Springbok who played in the 8 Nations tournament in the SA Games, who tackled, they were playing Germany in the final. And I think the guy's surname was Peter. Beat him, and he was in at 25, but it took him a bit low, and he got a red card. Brian Kelly took him, and Brian was hard as nails. And they got a shorty, but it was near about 5 minutes from the end, and we were leading 1-0, and they got a shorty, and they couldn't finish. And that was something exemplary. So he came and sat next to me, and he had a 6-pack like a Savanza. It was 5 minutes there. He says, Des, relax, have a beer. History is going to repeat itself.
A man's man.
Mornay, for you? Your biggest
Playing wise, when we were in grade 11, Maritzburg College, in Bloom. I think we beat them 7-4. It was an incredible game of ours.
I can remember that. Yeah.
It was 7-1 at halftime.
Yeah.
Really?
No, it was 1-1 at halftime.
Yeah. That
And it
makes
was
sense.
7-1. And Mr. Forsyth came to me, he said to me, Des, you know these guys always come back. I said, not now.
Not this year.
And then the worst defeat.
The worst defeat, Morne, you should know that.
Sure, let me think.
Oh, yes, we played Border. This is now, just to contradict what I've said now, we played Border at Hartley Vale in Cape Town. And if we beat Border, we're out of the bottom 4, and that's what you want to be. And it wasn't a rolling substitution, and I took 4 guys off. I put 4 guys on that hadn't played much. And they drew the game 7-all. And we lost in a penalty flick.
Oh, yeah, and back
With
then
7 minutes to go. I'm not lying to you.
Oh, that's a bad one.
Yeah. What is the other one that I was thinking about? Okay. Go on with your next question.
I'm asking for Mornay. What was your biggest
Sure,
defeat?
playing a tough one was losing against Paul Roos in Matric. I think it was the first time that I ever lost against them. We played there, we lost.
There, I remember. Yeah, the first time.
That wasn't fun.
Yeah, listen, we were made very aware of it. We
No,
were
definitely.
the first Grey College first team to lose against Paul Roos. Yeah, we were. Yeah.
We only lost 1.
No, that was in grade 11. We lost 1 against Weinberg at Case.
But I mean, we only lost once to Paul Roos, I think.
With you, yes.
Yeah, only one.
And
That's
that
that
was
one.
Simon
that-
Organ.
That was
Yeah.
in 2005. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, coach that you admire most, that made an impact in your life to become a coach.
As I said to you, there are a lot of coaches, but I must say Barry Bartlett. I don't know if you've heard of him. Barry Bartlett and Jock Coombs, and Neil Oskin. Good people that I could. And even old Bishop. Bishop and I were enemies, but we talk a lot of hockey.
Yeah, look, it was the funniest.
He's a good man.
The rivalry to go play Maritzburg College was always just to watch, actually, Des Donald, Mike Bishop going each other on
Your
the
own
bench.
Soapy.
100%.
It was the best sitting on the bench. I had front seats to this encounter. Grade 10, watching Des and Mike Bishop going at each other on the sideline. It was just spectacular. Better than the game itself. More name for you?
Mine would be Wimbrom, your dad, Mr. Donald, and my mom.
Yeah, quite people right near to you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. One thing every young player should do more of.
What age are we talking about?
No, just a young player. Let's say from under 12, under 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 around. I would put in that bracket.
I would go for enjoy the game. Find a space where you enjoy it. Do hockey because you love hockey. Don't do it because you want anything else out of it. And the rest will follow.
Mr. Donald, for you?
Yeah, I agree. Look, they must take a stick and a ball and they must play. And they must go through cones and beacons and obstacles on the grass. But the one thing that we are the weakest on in this country, especially at school level, is receiving a ball on a reverse set. If the years I coached Unisi, I used to coach him till I was blue in the face. And if we had actually been able to execute, we would have won a lot more games and scored a lot more goals. Because they can't stop that thing on the reverse.
I think that's one of the most difficult skills to actually do. is
But that's what I'm
track the
saying.
ball on the reverse, on the run. It's a difficult skill.
I've actually
to perform.
gone past Grey, and I've seen these guys, at Grey suddenly you can go on the Astra anytime, which I agree
That's
with.
awesome.
We weren't allowed to. And I agree with it totally. And you'd see one guy just passing on the reverse, picking up, passing on the reverse. But you haven't asked me yet, when did I think one of your questions somewhere along the line was, which game were you lucky to escape?
Yeah,
Right,
but share your story. Share your story.
Can I tell you the story?
Yes, please.
Man, Selborne scored a goal a minute from the end, and we were 1-0 down. And we had lost that game, we would have been history.
What year was this? Sorry.
I think it was 2008 or 7.
Okay.
So we got the ball, passed it to my friend Pat Botha, and he put it under the crossbar. Half a minute to go. From you, the umpire, you know.
I know that. It was on the halfway.
Wait, I remember.
I'm not done,
we didn't blow a foot. That's when the new rule came in.
Yeah, it's a new rule came in.
Yeah, I remember that.
Ball
I
can
was
hit, the ball can hit your foot if there's no one around and there's no benefit to the player. You play on, and I said play on. You know, and it was who was
I've only seen that rule enforced once.
Brad Hensberg, if I'm not remember correctly.
Pelts, maybe.
Pelts.
He was good.
Ball, everyone from Grey stopped. Ball hits the foot, I shall play on. Big ball from the half line into the circle, pick up, beat the keeper, score.
Luke Sannon.
Luke Sannon.
And he was standing, the guy who hit the foot standing here next to me.
Now, I stand there, goal. And the Grey boys are saying, what do you mean goal? And I just see Mr. Donald from the sideline. He goes down, picks up a Grey's hockey stick, and he's like, it's a foot!
Nice.
Anyway, my expression changed quickly when they put that one over.
Fair enough, yeah.
Moras, and so one thing I want to ask is, you've obviously won a lot of trophies with Oranje and with St. Anne's, the new team that you've coached back in KZN, Southern Free State and so forth. Which trophy win stood out most for you and why?
Sure, that's a great question, Brom. I think the biggest mental side of it is the next one or the previous one. So if you say previous one, it means the past. The next one means you're working towards something. And when you win it, that's the most valuable one. But the one that stood out to me the most is this year's St. Mary's Waverley. The amount of toughness it was for this group to win that tournament. I think if you had to put out odds, it was 1 in 1,000 that we were be able to get that right in a 3-month time. And the emotions that the players went through, and myself as a coach also had to go through, to eventually believe enough that we are good enough to win this trophy. That's the one that I think I'll remember forever.
Okay, Mr. Donald, and for you, in your coaching career, what win, what game, up until today, still gives you goosebumps when you think about it?
Look, we didn't get trophies nowadays. Only at IPT you got a trophy. And I mean, you win a league, yeah, but it wasn't an issue to win a league in those days. I just think individual games, that win of 7-4 was very special. And then that one year we played in a Nomads tournament we played at Selborne. Then we went to the Cares tournament in Joburg, and we came back to Bloemfontein, and we went to Argentina, and we played a club in Rosario, and there was a team there. They couldn't send the under-18 team. They couldn't fend an under-18 team, so they played down the 21 side. And I'm not lying to you. I had some of the youngsters on the field. Jaco was still a lighty then, and the balls were going shoo, 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 just like it. I remember one short corner they got, and Mackie, the coloured guy, on the post.
Yes.
This thing came like a bullet from a short. He just around the corner. And then I put the bigger boys on the park again. And we started changing. We won that game 2-1. It was probably the best hockey game I've ever seen Grey play. And the opposition was strong, and the ball speed was great, the intensity was great, but Grey just lived up to it. They stood up, and we beat them 2-1. And I don't think you two went to Argentina.
No, we never got the opportunity.
You got lost out there.
Yeah.
Sorry,
all the fun things happened when
you guys fault.
when we left.
Anyway, normally after the game, they invite you. You always have supper with them. That day it didn't happen.
You had to go to McDonald's.
Gentlemen, it's been such a fun episode, and I think we can keep on going with stories for another 2-3 hours. But just to conclude today's interview, what would your advice be for young and up-and-coming coaches?
I think you must be a sponge. You must, if there's a coaching course you can attend it. And I would like to see this happen in Bloemfontein even, where we can get together once a term, and he can prepare a thing, you can prepare a thing, anybody can prepare let's say, a thing about short corners or about defensive patterns or about attacking patterns. Because the game has changed, you know, the intensity is a lot higher. Guys are running at speed. They're stretching the field open, and that worries me a bit because the schools can't counter it. Now, you get one school coming and they come hell for leather at you. And then, I remember in the old days, the worst thing was if a guy runs into you and he's got stick work. You don't know how to tackle him.
Like Mornay used to have.
Yeah,
Hands.
but the emphasis on alpha leather. Eh? He's coming quickly.
Oh, sorry.
They
That's
come-
I was jogging.
but these girls, I mean,
Yes.
somehow you watch these guys, these Kasim brothers. You have to know what you're doing to channel them and to tackle them. What do? Do you play half court press? Do you play full court press? You know, the days are gone where you overcoach and you put people into a formation, into a pattern, and you look after certain parts of the field. But you have to somehow think of ways to bridge that problem and to overcome that problem. So I think we need sessions like an hour session at Monet's house or at your lovely place, yeah. And we get together, invite the coaches in, and we develop hockey. Because I don't think we're going to get very far. Free State, I'm talking Free State, if we don't keep our players. And Oranje and Unisi, I mean, they're the two top schools, girls' schools in South Africa, with no doubt, over the last 20 years. And we can keep those players here. And we need to do something to win IPTs again, at under 18, the boys at under 18. Even the boys, the days you guys play, we were never lower than fourth. And the same with the girls. And we need to, I think we've got a lot of good coaches around in this province now. There's not a lack of coaching. But we need to get systems in place where we can have evenings, an informal evening, and chat about things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Mr. Donald. Mornay, I just want to hear your insight on, what's your advice for young and up-and-coming coaches?
I think the easiest one is it's not about you as coach, it's about the players, and to take full accountability for every action, every moment. And then the next one is obviously go and learn as much as possible.
Yeah.
Never copy-paste, go steal ideas and make it your own.
Absolutely.
Because, as we said, when we started off, we were also floundering around. And then once you get into it, but you must have that attitude, I want to learn, and grow.
Absolutely. Insiders, there you have it. We've had an absolutely amazing opportunity to pick the brains of two great hockey coaches here in South Africa in their different eras. And one thing that I can pick up from this is that coaching is very much the same. There's a lot of similarities from what it used to be in 1970s to what it is in 2026. And that's the nice part of it. Yes, you add and you develop and you grow, but the similarities of getting the best out of players is still the same. You do it maybe in a different method or so, but for the young coaches out there, the experienced coaches out there, keep on growing, keep on learning, and keep on making an impact in the kids' lives and the players' lives that you are coaching at the moment. Mr. Donald, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Mornay, thank you very much, and good luck for the rest of your season. It's lying ahead. And Mr. Donald, for playing golf still, good luck for the golf sessions. I know you're on the course a lot these days.
He doesn't hit the ball very far, but accurate.
I play off the red tees. I shot the 80.
It's like the ladies.
I shot the 80. I shot the 80 on Wednesday.
That's really
Off the red tees.
magicals.
A 39 and a 41.
It's really impressive.
Insiders, thank you very much for tuning in for our Season 2, Episode 2 with Mr. Des Donald and Mornay Wirenal right here alongside of me. Catch us on the next episode.
Inside the